a catastrophic situation unfolding in India, as you know. Now it's all about what we can do. So what would you like to see Australia do? Do we cut all flights or increase the reduction? What do you think?
Well, firstly, we should be trying to reach out and supply whatever we can in terms of emergency assistance. Whether it is, as the AMA doctor was suggesting, whether we can do oxygen or the machines that help or the ventilators, we should reach out. India are one of our most important partners, friends in our region, and we should be doing everything we can. Most importantly, though, and where I did have to disagree with the gentleman from the AMA, the situation for Australian citizens overseas is the fundamental first core responsibility of the federal government. I've been quite shocked by their unwillingness to put on charter flights. And when you've got a situation where we've got so many Australian citizens stranded in India, the Australian government has a moral responsibility to get them out if they want out. And we should be absolutely chartering flights, getting over there and getting Australian citizens back out. That way, when you have a discussion about cutting off flights in from India, it doesn't matter in the sense that we have got all the Australians that want to come out. And that should be core responsibility. Now, that then bounces into the next great debate, which is another federal government fraud. Quarantine, and remember the famous words, will decide who comes to this country. John Howard didn't say the state governments will decide who comes to this country. This is a core federal government responsibility. They've got to step up on quarantine.
The states decided last year that they would handle it.
The states agreed to help because they could stand it up faster. This is myth that it's a state's responsibility. This is a fundamental core responsibility of the federal government. But we've even reached an emergency stage. We've got to get our citizens out of India. So they should stop blame shifting, stop the stunts, set up either Christmas Island, Curtin Air Base, any one of the facilities that we have available to us for an emergency response to deal with, I think someone said 9,000 Australians trying to get out of India. 8,000. This is an emergency situation. Put aside all the previous arguments, whose fault, just get the job done, Scott Morrison. Because
Peter Dutton says those places are not fit for purpose, though. I mean, there's so many shared facilities.
And neither are the hotels that we are currently forcing.
But aren't they the best that we've got?
This is an emergency situation. They can stand up very quickly the facilities that we need. They're not absolutely perfect, but let's be clear. The Medical Association, every state premier is saying hotels are not built for quarantine. So this argument that ours are worse from Peter Dutton, drop the politics here. Just get the Australians home, do what you need to do, put the resources into the places that exist today, Remember when it first broke, those first few thousand Australians coming out of China, we put them onto Christmas Island. No one objected. No one said that Christmas Island wasn't fit for purpose. The federal government did it. Then the state said we can ramp it up faster.
It's not going to help though. It's not going to help though if Mark McGowan wants to permanently reduce the intake.
Well, no. What he's saying is the federal Commonwealth. They don't decide the intake. They're just saying we're not going to quarantine more than X, Y, and Z. This is a federal government responsibility. Stop with this national cabinet absolute crap. Apologies to your viewers. This is rubbish.
Just one more. Is it going to be a bad look, I suppose, if Cricket Australia flies in chartered flights to grab the cricketers and leave everyone else behind?
This is terrible. This is where the federal government will be exposed. If the federal government agree to let Australian cricketers who are over there earning their living, no criticism about it all, but suddenly they get priority over the 8,000 Australians who've been trying to get home, can't get a government flight, can't afford to charter planes, this will be a terrible look for Scott Morrison. So drop all the politics. Just create whatever you need to do to be able to bring those Australians who are stranded and heading into a life-threatening situation as the COVID crisis tragically is running out of control in India. Bring them home and then bring the cricketers home with them.
OK, just under these comments from Mike Pezzullo today. Drums of war are beating. The country must be prepared to send off yet again our warriors to fight. What do you make of that? He doesn't mention China, but everyone knows who he's talking about.
Look, Mike's privy to all of the intelligence. I've known Mike for nearly 30 years. He's a very sensible person. He understands the geopolitical games that are played. You just got to look at the militarisation of China over the last 10 years. And for those Australians who want to say it's all Australia's fault, look, it is not Australia's fault that 200 pretend Coast Guard vessels are parked off Philippines right now. That's got nothing to do with Australia. It's got nothing to do with the fact that Chinese are breaching international airspace of the Taiwanese. The threats continually. Tragically, Mike is right to send the wake-up call. Australians have grown complacent since we won the Cold War. Frankly, that magnificent day when the wall fell, we all hoped that it would bring a new era. And it has for 30 or 40 years. But tragically, we've got the rise of a country that we all hoped would be a benign player on the world stage. But it is demonstrating in how it behaves in Hong Kong, how it behaves towards the
that was the sign, wasn't it? Hong Kong was the sign, and then Taiwan's next. That's just how it's going to be.
Correct, and we've got to make Australians understand that this is not, as some try and say, Australia's fault. China do not care what Australia says.
Do we go in then, Stephen? Do we go in?
Oh, look, that's a different issue. The question of whether we are obligated in any way to defend Taiwan. We've got no treaty with Taiwan. ANZUS is about attacks on the American soil or Australian soil. You can invoke ANZUS. I'm not sure whether or not Australia has to be drawn into a situation where if America want to defend Taiwan, that Australia has to be a player. But having said that, some of our facilities, Pine Gap, will be vital to the coordination of any American material. We could potentially become a target, and Australians again need to understand that it is China's behaviour that is driving this destabilisation in our region. It is not the Australian government's commentary or Francis Adamson's statements or Mike Pezzullo's statements. It is the Chinese government's desire to achieve its objectives, irrespective of anything Australia says. We just get trapped into this media discussion with a few businessmen who say, hey, it's all Australia's fault. Our iron ore exports might be, be reduced or curtailed, our lobster exports. And these are things Australians have got to prepare for. Wow. As I think you said earlier, you've got to, hope for the best, but prepare for the worst. And Australians need this wake-up call, unfortunately.
Yeah, and Matt Canavan agreed with you there too. Stephen Conroy, always good to chat. We'll talk to you again soon.
Great to talk.
Yeah, always good to talk.